Hey guys, welcome to this short clip. What a week has it been? So I've just done this video for us to talk about the winner this week. It has to be none other than Kenneth Makate. Obviously, it's all over the news that he won his legal battle against Vodacom. Vodacom being a listed giant in the JSE. So you can imagine the hoops that he had to go through in terms of really fighting this from the beginning until the end. And if you think about it, normally large enterprises, when they have these legal suits, because they have money, they have the budget, they try by all means to drag the case so that you end up either getting frustrated, giving up, or your even legal team giving up on you because you can't foot the bill, you can't pay your legal fees. But props to him, really, like he's fought this from the end. I mean, he's fought this from the beginning until the end, which is really commendable if you think about how a story of how one has to really believe on their conviction and believe on what they think it's theirs and they deserve. So it's a beautiful story that's really going to change in terms of also employer-employee relationships. If you think about how companies encourage employees to be creative, to be innovative, then it means there has to be a borderline around what you define as a noble idea, that you have to compensate your employees and applaud them for the idea before it gets out of the way and haunt you in the future, right? So for this video, I just want us to look at the timeline in terms of the trajectory of what the legal case went through. I mean, this took about 17 years, if not 18, in and out of court. That's quite a lifetime if you think about it, right? So I want us to look at that. I want us to look at that timeline and see what were the major events that happened. But beyond what happened in the courts, often for listed companies like Vodacom, there's actually a lot that happens in the background around disclosure and compliance in as far as this is concerned, because it's a huge case. And Vodacom being a listed company, they are accountable to investors. They are accountable to pension funds who invest into their stock. They are accountable to you and I who might have decided at some point to buy shares. They are also accountable to people who them as Vodacom owes money, which most of the time would be institutional companies or investment banks for that matter, right? So you're going to talk about how the disclosure looked like in Vodacom's balance sheet or financial statements, because often those are the things that are overlooked, and whether really Vodacom did what they had to do, and the implication of this on their share price, right? So in as far as the timeline is concerned, this legal battle was filed in 2008. That's when Makate officially said, I think I have a legal case here. Vodacom has to compensate me for this. Please call me idea or PCM. And what Vodacom did was to say, nah, bro, you don't have a case. Sort of, they were just like bullshitting him to say, nah, you don't have claims, or you don't have a valid claim to stand on, right? And guess what? By 2016, the court actually rules in favor of Kenneth Makate to say, yeah, you do deserve. And as far as there's an employment agreement, or there's an agreement that exists between you and the employer is actually liable for this type of claim against them. That is when really Makate started to, I think that is when he saw that the wheel has really turned against Vodacom, thinks the odds are against me, and I have to fight this. Probably that is when he started to really sit down with his legal team to say, how are you going to maneuver around this case? And because I don't think he had the money to have taken Vodacom by the horns. I doubt. And remember, Vodacom is not just listed in South Africa. It's a global company. They are listed. I think it's just listed here in JSE in South Africa. And because it's a UK company, most definitely they are listed in the UK Stock Exchange or the London Stock Exchange. So yeah, this is what happened. The court says, no, this man has a claim, and then it goes all the way to 2019. When the court ruled in favor of Makate, before I jump to 2019, they subsequently said to both parties, Makate and Vodacom, go back and look at settlement and come back and tell us what you guys have decided on this, right? And then the CEO goes to look into the numbers, crunch numbers, probably with the accountants, to see ideally what would a fair value of this settlement look like. And that is when Vodacom came back with the CEO to say, no, we think that a fair value for this settlement would be around 47 million. And Makate said, nah, he rejected the offer. That is when they went back now to say, now they went to the High Court, right? The High Court set aside the settlement that was done previously, the 47 million, still in favor of Makate to say, no, this is not it. It's not sufficient, right? The court further went on in 2014 to make estimations or projections of what they think the settlement should be in the region of. And at that time, they were looking at about 5 to 7% of total revenue related to Please Call Me calls, which were in billions at the time. And then Vodacom realized that, shucks, how are you going to get this amount of money and how are you going to settle this, because it's very huge. And then they fought it to say, no, it's not, it can't be in that region for whatever reasons. So that was in 2024 when the court actually estimated that the 5 to 7% revenue related to the PCM calls. And yeah, guess what? Only in the previous week now, Vodacom has actually finally decided to, both parties, I would say, decided to settle out of court to say, let's sign a non-disclosure agreement and we'll settle this outside of court. Which I think a lot of accountants, particularly Bloomberg, they somehow believe that the settlement is just around, call it 550 million in total in South African rand, which is quite a substantial amount of money. But if we were going to work off the 550 million, Makate has got to also juggle numbers to say, if I get this amount of money, how much are the legal fees? So he may have struck a deal to say, you'll get a certain percentage of whatever the amount we get as settlement, right? Or a fixed fee, or whatever the case may be, that they would have agreed on with his legal team, right? So definitely, he's not going to be in possession of the entire settlement. He has to pay his legal team, one. And I think people are laughing when I say this, and it's highly probable. South African Revenue Service will come after him to also claim what's theirs in Texas, right? So it's really fair to say he will end up with substantial amount of money, but there are these things that he has to, he also has got these obligations, and as far as money is concerned, or liabilities that he has to settle before he can say this is the amount of money that I have that belongs to me, which is very interesting. But overall, I'm saying what he has done is very commendable. It's groundbreaking. And I think it will go down as one of the biggest legal cases, particularly that it's not a company against a company, but it was an individual, a young black South African who fights this giant and eventually end up winning the case. So yeah, I think that's far as the timeline is concerned. I also wanted to talk about the expectations of investors in as far as legal entities are concerned. When something like this huge or material legal case happens. So remember, Vodacom is listed. There are investors who've got interest in how the company is performing, particularly around the profits, around dividends that gets paid, around how the share price is doing, and in terms of the capital project that Vodacom is going to embark on, right? So as soon as there's this money that is no longer available for either paying dividends or for capital expansions and investments, then it means investors are on the back foot. So that is why every single listed company is available for scrutiny. So you are required as a listed company by accounting standards and JSE to comply to certain laws that says you need to disclose these kind of things which are material to have an impact on the share price or which could collapse even the company on its own. So in as far as this is concerned, or the accounting aspects of it are concerned, there are, we call it IFRS. So it's IFRS, it's International Accounting Standards. So in that there's a standard that says, it's IAS, I think 37 if I'm not mistaken, which speaks to provisions, contingent liabilities and contingent assets. So in a layman's term, what this means is that if you have a legal case as huge as this one, by the time you realize that this is going to happen, even if you don't know, you are not sure about the timing of it or the actual amount of money which you will end up having to pay, you need to disclose that in your financial statements. So if you go through, for example, Vodacom's financial year ended statements for this year at March 2025, you would have seen there's a specific note in the financial statement that speaks about this legal case, although they wouldn't have went and as far as disclosing the value. But as far as accounting is concerned, they would have sat in the background and done provisions to make sure that by the time when we are supposed to pay for this legal fee, we need to have accumulated or made a kitty amount of money building up into this case that when it happens, it doesn't dent our financials and at the end impact our investors in the share price. So in as far as that is concerned, I think they've done brilliantly. The courts may have been dragged, they may have dragged, the court cases may have dragged, so to speak, right? But if you look around what they were doing in the background, probably just a thing of like, we hope that he gives up or something happens to him, or if not, throughout the next financial year, we're going to be building up a kitty to help us see through this kind of legal battle. Because if you are going to pay it in one financial year without making provisions, it would definitely dent your profitability. And as mentioned, your share price would get, dented, right? So I think in as far as that's concerned, they were buying time for them to get through all these things. It may have not been so convenient for Makate, obviously, because he just wanted to get this thing sorted and he can carry on and live his own life. So yeah, that's as far as financial statements are concerned. So Vodacom has consistently communicated this to investors and through sent statements to JSE that this is where we are with the case. That was done, I think it was done brilliantly. Even over time, the investors who own Vodacom, who've got people who've got Vodacom shares, they were pretty much aware that there's this court case that exists, even if when you don't know the impact of it, how it's going to be. But it was throughout built in the price, in the share price of the company. So if you were gonna go to buy Vodacom in the last month, definitely it was priced in, although the value was not determined. But you as an investor, you would have bought the share knowing exactly that there is this pending legal case against Vodacom, which may go either way. If they win the case, it's good for me as an investor, but if it goes the other way like it did, then it means the share price would be impacted. So that's what JSE requires. If you are listed, you have to, if there's anything that is material that may likely impact your investors and you're well aware of the details, you have to issue a sense statement as and when there's developments to say this is what's happening, right? And you would have seen every time when this is communicated, definitely the share price would get a bit of a knock. So if you think about, so I looked at the share price as at this week on Monday, Vodacom share price was trading at about just over 140 rand per share. This was before the news. And by yesterday, when this was announced, the share price completely tumbled or tanked to just above 130 rand. So you can see that there's a difference of about 9 rand, which is about 3% tank or decline in the share price. So I'm saying throughout they managed it smartly. It was well thought. You can see that they knew what they were doing. Than if they're just going to out of nowhere announce that we are paying this man this amount of money, then the knockdown would have been quite significant. And as I'm saying, throughout the years they were making provisions for this. So yeah, that's what happened with Makate and Vodacom PCM saga. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this content, and please help me to grow this channel. If you like the content, please subscribe, like, or even comment in terms of the content about this. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you. Pula.